Number 1. Jimmy C. Wingo. When Jimmy Wingo walked out of jail on Christmas Eve 1982, nothing about him screamed danger to those who didn't know his past. A former Boy Scout, even a brief stint as a policeman, he once stood on the side of the law. But in the hours that followed his escape, a quiet rural home in Louisiana would become a scene of unimaginable horror, and 2 innocent lives would end in cold blood. Jimmy Wingo's criminal history did not begin with the crimes that sealed his fate. Born in 1952, by his early 30s he had already built a record of escalating offenses, landing him behind bars in Webster Parish Jail in Minden, Louisiana, on burglary charges. There he shared space with a much younger inmate, 20-year-old Jimmy L. Glass, a small, wiry high school dropout already convicted of armed robbery and described in court as far less physically imposing than the larger, more experienced Wingo. Freedom came suddenly on December 24th, 1982. Around 8 p.m. Wingo, the driving force behind the breakout, orchestrated the escape. The 2 men slipped away under cover of darkness, avoiding roads and trekking several miles along desolate railroad tracks. Penniless, dressed only in jail clothes, and desperate for money, weapons, clothing, and a vehicle to flee the area, their need turned deadly. That desperation led them straight to the rural home of Newton Brown, 55, a large, strong, active man known for being fiercely protective, and his wife, Early Neely Brown, 51. The couple was spending what should have been a peaceful Christmas Eve in their modest house in the small town of Dixie Inn, completely unaware that 2 escaped convicts were approaching. What unfolded inside was far more than a simple burglary. The patio door glass was shattered for entry. The house was thoroughly ransacked, drawers overturned, valuables seized. But the intruders didn't stop there. The Browns were overpowered, bound hand and foot, gagged, and forced onto their bed. Newton fought back hard, leaving defensive wounds on his elbows and abrasions on his knuckles, as he likely tried to reach a pistol hidden in his closet or simply shield his wife from harm. A loyal Dalmatian dog was in the bedroom, adding chaos to the struggle. Yet none of it was enough. Both Newton and Earline were executed with gunshots to the back of the head. A cold, methodical double murder. The killers took cash, clothing, weapons, ammunition, and the Browns' Lincoln automobile before vanishing into the night. The bodies were discovered the next morning, Christmas Day, by a concerned family. The fugitives didn't go far at first. By daybreak on Christmas, Wingo and Glass arrived together at Wingo's sister's home in Vivian, Louisiana, loaded with the stolen goods from the Browns' house. Wingo, clearly the dominant figure in the pair, burst in threatening to kill his brother-in-law, Frank Whittington, over an old grudge tied to a missed jail visit. His girlfriend, Gwen Hill, the mother of one of his children, managed to calm him down. Joined now by Hill, the group fled further in a Datsun pickup across state lines into East Texas. Glass eventually split off and was later captured in California. Wingo and Hill were finally cornered and arrested on January 5th, 1983, hiding in dense woods near Atlanta, Texas. At the time of capture, Wingo was wearing gloves that matched fabric prints left on a ransacked dresser at the crime scene. He even made a chilling admission to an officer. "I always wear gloves when I commit a crime." Buried nearby were items directly traceable to the Browns, and fiber evidence from pants Wingo left behind matched a blanket on the victim's bed. Almost immediately, the story split. Glass claimed the larger, older Wingo forced him at shotgun point to pull the trigger, holding the weapon to his head. Wingo, on the other hand, insisted he stayed outside the entire time, completely unaware any killings had taken place, pinning it all on Glass acting alone. But the evidence told a different story, one of equal partnership in a brutal crime. Powerful circumstantial proof mounted. The joint escape initiated by Wingo, their shared desperate motives, arriving together at relatives with the exact stolen loot, casual statements about having robbed a house to get the money and guns, and the sheer physical impossibility of the smaller Glass single-handedly subduing a strong, fighting Newton Brown, controlling the protective dog, binding both victims, and executing them without help. Separate trials followed quickly. Glass went first, swiftly convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. Wingo's trial leaned heavily on Louisiana's requirement of specific intent to kill or inflict great bodily harm, not mere felony murder. The jury found multiple aggravating factors: the murders committed during aggravated burglary, armed robbery, and escape from custody, plus knowingly creating risk of death to more than one person. No mitigating circumstances outweighed the horror. Death sentence. Appeals stretched across years in courts. In 1984, the Louisiana Supreme Court upheld everything, bluntly dismissing Wingo's claim of waiting outside as simply not a compelling hypothesis. Federal habeas petitions in the Fifth Circuit exhaustively reviewed every angle, from compliance with Mund intent rules, evidence sufficiency under Jackson versus Virginia, jury instructions, claims of ineffective counsel, racial bias in jury selection, dismissed since all parties involved were white, to allegations of discriminatory application of the death penalty, all rejected. One late appeal centered on a videotape of Gwen Hill claiming her trial testimony had been coerced by threats of a long prison sentence, but the state pardon board reviewed it and still refused commutation. Governor Edwin Edwards stood firm, stating he would not intervene without clear proof of innocence. Multiple resentencings amid the appeals led to Wingo being sentenced to death a total of 4 times. Finally, a 7-2 Supreme Court vote cleared the last hurdle. On June 16, 1987, at Angola State Penitentiary, 35-year-old Jimmy Wingo met his mother one final time. Warden Hilton Butler later described him as remarkably calm, still clinging to faint hope of gubernatorial mercy, but fully prepared if it never came. Outside the prison walls, a handful of death penalty supporters gathered, one teenager, who had lost his own sister to murder, holding a sign that read, "Tell them about Jesus, then put them in the chair." His accomplice Jimmy Glass had already been executed just 4 days earlier on June 12th. As the moment arrived, Wingo's final statement echoed through the room. "I am an innocent man. You are murdering me this day. I do still love you all in Christ. God bless you all." Louisiana's electric chair took his life that night, the 4th execution in just 9 days. The sentence was carried out for the merciless murders of Newton and Earlene Brown on Christmas 1982. Prosecutors and every reviewing court painted Wingo as the driving, dominant force behind a vicious crime spree born of escape and greed. He maintained his innocence until the very end. When a man with a proven capacity for violence walks free and kills again, who bears responsibility? The individual who pulled the trigger, or the system that opened the door? Number 2. James Edward Wood. When James Edward would step back into society after serving time for earlier crimes, nothing about him screamed danger to those who didn't know his dark past. A man with a troubled childhood, marked by his father's imprisonment in Leavenworth Penitentiary and his mother's tragic death in a house fire. He claimed vague memories of abuse at the hands of his stepfather, experiences that some speculated twisted him into a monster. But in the early 1990s, at age 45, Wood would unleash horrors that shocked even seasoned investigators, earning him a reputation as one of America's most prolific and depraved predators, credited with at least 85 rapes, 185 robberies, and dozens of unsolved murders across states. James Edward Wood's criminal history did not begin with the crimes that sealed his fate. Born on December 9, 1947, and originally named James Godwin, Wood grew up in a fractured world that seemed to breed his rage. His father's incarceration left a void, and his mother's fiery death haunted him, fueling what forensic psychologists later described as a deep-seated anger toward women and a compulsion to steal innocence and success from others. By adulthood, Wood had morphed into a career criminal, a serial rapist who thrived on control, vengeance, and utter lack of remorse. In 1970, he was convicted of a brutal murder in Louisiana, where he shot and killed a victim during a robbery gone wrong, showcasing his early propensity for lethal violence. Released after serving time, he relocated to Idaho, blending into small-town life in Pocatello, working odd jobs, and hiding his predatory urges. But beneath the surface lurked a psychopath whose sexual paraphilias, deviant obsessions that experts deemed untreatable, escalated in intensity, frequency, and brutality, turning him into a ticking bomb. Freedom for Wood meant opportunity for horror, and on June 29, 1993, his demons fully emerged. That fateful day, 11-year-old Geraldine Underwood, a bright and innocent newspaper delivery girl from Pocatello, Idaho, was out collecting payments from customers on her route, a routine chore that should have been safe in her quiet community. Wood, visiting a customer's home nearby, spotted her. With chilling calculation, he followed the child, luring her with a fabricated story before forcing her into his car at gunpoint. What followed was a nightmare that gripped the region in panic, as search teams scoured the area and her family endured agonizing uncertainty. Wood held Geraldine captive for over a day in a remote spot, subjecting her to unimaginable sexual molestation, a violation driven by his twisted need to dominate and destroy innocence. But the depravity didn't end there. On June 30th, 1993, Wood executed her with a single shot to the head from a .22 caliber pistol, her young life snuffed out in cold blood. Hiding her body under brush near the Snake River, he returned 7 days later in a macabre ritual that horrified even hardened detectives. He undressed the corpse, sexually mutilated her by removing her sex organs, and then dismembered her, severing her arms, legs, head, and throwing her clothing and body parts into the murky waters of the Snake River. The remains were later recovered, except for her right hand and right calf, in a gruesome discovery that fueled nightmares across Idaho and beyond. This wasn't just murder, it was a calculated desecration, a final act of rage and control that experts linked to Wood's escalating paraphilias and antisocial personality disorder, a condition they warned was incurable, making him an extreme risk to society, even in prison. The community's response was massive. Volunteers, including local church members and law enforcement, mobilized in a desperate search for the missing girl, turning Pocatello into a town on edge. Wood, meanwhile, continued his facade, but cracks soon appeared. Arrested on July 6, 1993, exactly a week after the abduction, after suspicions mounted and evidence pointed his way, Wood initially denied involvement. But under intense interrogation by Pocatello Police Detective John Shaw, he broke, leading authorities to Geraldine's mutilated remains and confessing not only to her kidnapping, rape, murder, and dismemberment, but also to a staggering litany of other crimes. He admitted to raping other local girls, committing armed robberies, and even prior killings, including the Louisiana murder from decades earlier. In chilling interviews, Wood showed no remorse, describing his acts with detachment, as if recounting mundane events, behavior that forensic psychologist Dr. Vicki Gregory later analyzed as evidence of a predator driven purely by vengeance, with no capacity for empathy or change. The stories from Wood's confessions painted him as a serial offender whose crimes spanned states, from Louisiana to Idaho, with victims young and old falling prey to his impulsive violence. He claimed dozens of murders, though many remained unverified, adding layers of terror to his profile. Prosecutors, piecing together his history, revealed a man who had evaded justice for years, his sexual mutilations and dismemberments becoming signatures of his escalating depravity. Wood's own words in media interviews and to investigators were damning. He repeatedly admitted the slaying, initially demanding execution as if seeking a twisted form of redemption. Separate trials weren't needed. Wood, facing 12 felonies including first-degree murder, first-degree kidnapping, and multiple counts of rape, waived his preliminary hearing and pled guilty on September 14, 1993, to the core charges: first-degree murder, first-degree kidnapping, and 2 counts of rape. The rest were dismissed without prejudice. His trial leaned heavily on his confessions, physical evidence from the Snake River recovery, and Idaho's requirement of specific intent to kill or inflict great bodily harm, not mere felony murder. The jury wasn't involved. Wood's guilty plea thrust the case straight to sentencing. Aggravating factors piled up. The murder committed during aggravated battery on a child under 12, exhibiting utter disregard for human life. The heinous, atrocious, and cruel nature of the crime, and his propensity to commit murder, posing a continuing threat to society. No mitigating circumstances, such as his abusive childhood or claims of mental instability, outweighed the horror, experts testified. Dr. Gregory's neuropsychological evaluation was damning. Wood's sexual paraphilias couldn't be treated, would escalate, and marked him as a high-risk danger, even to other inmates. Sentencing came swiftly on January 14, 1994. Death for the murder, plus consecutive life terms for the kidnappings and rapes. The judge, Lynn Windmill, weighed the brutality, the sexual mutilation, dismemberment, and callous disposal as evidence of a cold-blooded, pitiless slayer. Appeals dragged on for years, with Wood challenging everything from his guilty plea to claims of ineffective counsel. In 1998, the Idaho Supreme Court upheld the death sentence for the second time, rejecting arguments that his rights were violated in private plea meetings, that his public defender Monty Whittier had conflicts due to church ties with the victim's family, or that religious doctrines like blood atonement, a purported Mormon belief in spilling blood for forgiveness, influenced his plea. Whittier, a fellow Mormon, denied coercing Wood, but appeals highlighted odd tactics. Whittier drafting a hoax book contract to curb Wood's media blabbing, and failing to suppress confessions or present mitigation. The court conceded Whittier's mistakes but ruled none changed the outcome. Wood's guilt was ironclad. Federal habeas petitions in the Ninth Circuit echoed the exhaustion. From in-mund intent rules ensuring Wood's culpability, to evidence sufficiency under Jackson versus Virginia, proving rational jurors could convict beyond doubt. Claims of racial bias in jury selection were dismissed, all parties white, and discriminatory death penalty application rejected after proportionality reviews. Late appeals centered on a videotape of a witness alleging coerced testimony, but the state pardon board refused commutation. Governor Dirk Kemp Thorne stood firm, echoing predecessors. No intervention without innocence proof. Multiple resentencings amid appeals saw Wood condemned 4 times, but a 7-2 U.S. Supreme Court denial cleared the final hurdle. On death row at Idaho Maximum Security Institution, 56-year-old James Edward Wood awaited execution, his case inspiring books like Eye of the Beast, which chronicled his psychopathic rage through forensic lenses and community anguish. But fate intervened. On January 30th, 2004, Wood suffered a fatal heart attack, dying in prison without facing the needle. No execution date had been set. His appeals lingered before the Idaho Supreme Court. Prison officials confirmed the cause, ending a saga that left Idaho haunted. James Edward Wood's story endures as a chilling, cautionary tale of a predator who stole innocence across decades, his mutilations and murders fueling debates on untreatable evil. Was he a product of childhood trauma or pure malice? Court said killer, experts said incurable. In Pocatello, Jerry memory lingers, a reminder that monsters walk among us, their crimes defying comprehension. When a man with a proven capacity for violence walks free and kills again, who bears responsibility? The individual who pulled the trigger, or the system that opened the door? Number 3. Robert Lee Willie. When Robert Lee Willie stepped back into society after a string of arrests that began his teens, nothing about him screamed danger to those who didn't know his volatile past. A high school dropout with a reputation as a knife man, he came from a fractured family. His father, John Willie, a notorious criminal who spent over half his life in Angola Penitentiary for manslaughter and other violent crimes, serving as a twisted role model. But in the spring of 1980, at age 22, Willie would unleash a horror that gripped Louisiana, earning him a spot on death row and inspiring the chilling character in the Oscar-winning film Dead Man Walking, where his defiance and lack of remorse haunted a nation. Robert Lee Willie's criminal history did not begin with the crimes that sealed his fate. Born in 1958 in Covington, Louisiana, Willie grew up in the shadow of his father's infamy. John Willie, known as Snitchin' Willie in prison, was a mean, knife-wielding thug who'd stab someone as easily as look at them. Young Robert followed suit early. Arrested at age 14 for shoplifting, his rap sheet ballooned to include burglary, assaulting a police officer, and jail escapes. By his early 20s, Willie was a habitual offender, hooked on drugs and booze, with a penchant for violence that locals whispered about. He carried knives proudly, racking up charges across St. Tammany Parish. But nothing prepared the community for the savage escalation that would link him forever to one of Louisiana's most infamous killings. Freedom for Willie meant chaos, and on the night of May 27, 1980, his path crossed with 18-year-old Faith Hathaway, a vibrant Mandeville woman celebrating her last night as a civilian before entering the U.S. Army. Hathaway had been out at the Lakefront Theater discotheque, toasting her future with friends, when she decided to walk home alone around 4:30 a.m. on May 28th. Willie, cruising with his accomplice Joseph Vaccaro, both loaded on a cocktail of drugs including acid, pills, and alcohol, spotted her on a Mandeville road. Pretending to offer a ride, they lured her into their white pickup truck, but instead of taking her home, they drove her to a remote, wooded gorge known as Frick's Cave, south of Franklin and in Washington Parish, a secluded spot perfect for their depraved plans. What unfolded in that heavily wooded ravine was a nightmare of unimaginable cruelty. Blindfolded and terrified, Hathaway begged for mercy, repeatedly assuring them, "I won't identify y'all or nothing. Don't hurt me." But Willie and Vaccaro ignored her pleas. They raped her repeatedly, the assault fueled by their drug-induced frenzy. Then, in a brutal climax, one held her hands while the other stabbed her 17 times in the throat, her screams echoing through the trees as she bled out. Each man later blamed the other for the fatal blows, Willie claiming Vaccaro did the stabbing, Vaccaro insisting it was Willie, but the evidence painted them as equal partners in the savagery. Hathaway's body, left in the underbrush, was discovered on June 4, 1980, her clothes and purse found 150 yards away, confirming the horror. The depravity didn't stop with Hathaway. Just 8 days later, on June 1, 1980, Willie and Vaccaro struck again, kidnapping a Madisonville couple, 16-year-old Debbie Cuevas, now Debbie Morris, and her 20-year-old boyfriend Mark Brewster, from a wooded lover's lane near the Chafunky River. High on drugs, they pistol-whipped Brewster, locked him in the trunk of his own car, and raped Cuevas in the back seat. Driving across state lines through Mississippi and Alabama, they turned off Interstate 10 into dense woods, where they tortured Brewster, burning him with cigarettes, stabbing him in the side, slashing his throat, shooting him in the head, and leaving him tied to a tree to die. Miraculously, Brewster survived, though paralyzed from the waist down, his testimony later sealing Willie's fate. Cuevas, whom Willie mockingly called his girlfriend and spared because she was too damn pretty, endured 30 hours of terror, raped repeatedly, threatened with being burned alive in the trunk, and driven back to Louisiana in a futile search for more drugs. At one point, Vaccaro rambled about their last girlfriend being all cut up and stabbed, spilling details of Hathaway's murder. A third man, Tommy Holden, briefly joined at his trailer, where Vaccaro raped Cuevas again at Willie's insistence. Holden, panicked, argued against killing her, and eventually, they released her near a Madisonville cemetery with threats to kill her if she talked. Cuevas' sharp memory of landmarks led police to Brewster, clinging to life. The fugitives didn't evade capture long. On June 3, 1980, Willie and Vaccaro were arrested in Hope, Arkansas, for unrelated crimes of aggravated rape, kidnapping, and attempted murder. While in custody, on June 10th, they confessed to Louisiana officers, Investigator Varnado and Sergeant Sharp, about Hathaway's abduction, each fingering the other for the rape and stabbing. Willie showed no remorse, casually admitting to the horrors as if recounting a mundane night out. Vaccaro echoed the blame game, but evidence tied them both as principals under Louisiana law. The story split immediately, Willie claiming Vaccaro stabbed Hathaway while he held her hands, Vaccaro insisting Willie wielded the knife. But the physical evidence was damning. Hathaway's wounds showed a struggle, her necklace embedded in her throat from the frenzied attack, and signs of rape confirmed. Willie mocked victims in court, blowing kisses at Cuevas and drawing his finger across his throat at Brewster, whose paralysis stemmed from their brutality. Willie's confessions extended to other crimes. The 1978 killing of Dennis Emby near Covington, where he and cousin Perry Wayne Taylor beat and drowned the victim for $10,000 in marijuana, admissions that painted him as a remorseless killer. Separate trials followed swiftly in Washington Parish. Vaccaro went first, convicted of first-degree murder but sentenced to life, thanks to a single juror holdout who opposed death, ironically excused from Willie's panel for anti-death penalty views. Willie's October 1980 trial leaned on his taped confession, eyewitness accounts, and Louisiana's principal law holding both equally guilty. The jury found aggravating factors: murder during aggravated rape, committed in an especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel manner. No mitigating circumstances, like his abusive upbringing or drug-fueled state, swayed them. Sentence: death. Appeals stretched across years in courts. In 1982, the Louisiana Supreme Court conditionally affirmed the conviction, but vacated the sentence, remanding to check if a mysterious note near the scene created doubt, ultimately deemed irrelevant. A new penalty hearing in 1983 reaffirmed death, upheld in State v. Willie, 436, So.2d, 553, Law 1983. Federal habeas in the Fifth Circuit, 737 F.2d, 1372, 1984, exhaustively reviewed. Jurors exposed to co-defendants' voir dire. No bias found. Peremptory challenges, proper. Confession validity under Edwards v. Arizona, admissible, as Willie reinitiated talks. Witherspoon exclusions valid. Venue change denial. Publicity not pervasive enough. Prosecutor's inflammatory closing, not fundamentally unfair. Ineffective counsel, no prejudice shown. Discriminatory death penalty, unsupported. A key appeal centered on conflicts. Willie's lawyer at resentencing had represented Vaccaro, but courts found no adverse effect. Governor Edwin Edwards refused clemency without innocence proof. A 7-2 U.S. Supreme Court denial cleared the path, but Willie's case gained notoriety through Sister Helen Prejean, his spiritual advisor, whose book Dead Man Walking blended his story with Elmo Patrick Sawyer's, inspiring the film where Sean Penn's character captured Willie's cocky defiance. On December 28, 1984, at Angola State Penitentiary, 26-year-old Robert Lee Willie met his mother and siblings one last time. Warden Ross Maggio Jr. described him as quiet but unafraid. Outside, death penalty supporters, including Faith's parents Vernon and Elizabeth Harvey, founders of Parents of Murdered Children, gathered, having become ardent advocates after watching Willie's trial. Protesters held vigils at the governor's mansion. Willie's last meal: fried fish, oysters, shrimp, fries, and salad. Strapped into the electric chair in jeans, white sweatshirt, and slippers, he addressed the Harveys. "I would just like to say, Mr. and Mrs. Harvey, that I hope you get some relief from my death. Killing people is wrong. That's why you put me to death. It makes no difference whether it's citizens, countries, or governments. Killing is wrong." As the hood descended, he asked to be lifted, winking at Prejean, who prayed, "Forgive those who collaborate." Jolted by 2,000 volts for 10 seconds, then 500 for 20, repeated once. Willie was pronounced dead at 12:15 a.m., the sixth Louisiana execution in 13 months, 32nd nationwide since 1977. The Harveys celebrated with drinks, Vern quipping about dancing, finding closure in his death. Robert Lee Willie's story endures as a cautionary tale of drug-fueled rage, fractured families, and justice's grim machinery. Was he a product of his father's shadow, or pure evil? Courts said killer, survivors like Debbie Morris, who forgave him through faith, authoring Forgiving the Dead Man Walking, found peace beyond vengeance. In Mandeville, faith's memory lingers, a reminder that even celebrations can hide darkness. Number 4. Robert Wayne Williams. When Robert Wayne Williams stepped back into society after a string of arrests that marked him as a habitual offender, nothing about him screamed danger to those who didn't know his volatile past. A man from the underbelly of Baton Rouge, born around 1951, he grew up in a world of petty crimes escalating to armed violence, influenced perhaps by a lack of guidance and a penchant for quick cash. But in early 1979, at age 28, Williams would commit an act so brazen and brutal that it shocked Louisiana, becoming the first man executed in the state after the U.S. Supreme Court reinstated the death penalty in 1976, a case that highlighted the horrors of the electric chair and fueled debates on cruel and unusual punishment. Robert Wayne Williams' criminal history did not begin with the crimes that sealed his fate. Born circa 1951 in Louisiana, little is known of his early life beyond a pattern of escalating offenses that painted him as a career criminal driven by greed and impulsivity. By his late 20s, Williams had a rap sheet filled with robberies, burglaries, and assaults, blending into the gritty streets of East Baton Rouge Parish. He thrived on high-stakes heists, often armed and reckless, with a disregard for human life that experts later linked to a cold, remorseless demeanor. Released from prior stints behind bars, he relocated within the area, taking odd jobs, but always eyeing easy targets like supermarkets, where security was lax and cash registers full. Beneath the surface lurked a man whose actions would soon echo through courtrooms and execution chambers, his crimes becoming a benchmark for the resumption of capital punishment in the South. Freedom for Williams meant opportunity for chaos, and on the night of January 5th, 1979, a harsh, cool Friday, he and accomplice Ralph Holmes targeted the A&P supermarket at 3525 Perkins Road in Baton Rouge. Masked and armed, Williams wielded a 12-gauge, sawed-off shotgun, a weapon of devastating close-range power. They burst in, zeroing on 67-year-old Willie Kelly, a small, unassuming security guard bagging groceries, 5'4", 135 pounds, no match for the intruders. Holmes tried to grab Kelly's pistol from his holster as the guard's hand instinctively moved toward it. "Don't try it," Williams barked, leveling the shotgun and firing point-blank into Kelly's face, the blast hurling him backward in a spray of blood, dead before hitting the floor. The depravity didn't pause. Chaos erupted. Screams filled the air as Williams and Holmes demanded cash, scooping bills from registers. In the frenzy, Williams laid the shotgun down to grab fallen money, only for it to accidentally discharge, blasting pellets into customers' legs and feet, wounding several in agonizing sprays of blood and bone. Holmes' pistol whipped a defiant shopper, cracking skulls amid the terror. They fled into the night with the loot, leaving a scene of carnage. Kelly's faceless body in a pool of blood, terrified witnesses nursing wounds, and a community reeling from the senseless violence. The investigation ignited immediately. Assistant District Attorney John Sinkfield arrived at the blood-soaked supermarket, repulsed by the gore but driven to build a case. Weeks dragged with no leads, frustration mounting, until a tipster's call implicated Williams and Holmes. Arrested soon after, Williams confessed on video, detailing the robbery, but claiming the shotgun discharged accidentally when Kelly resisted. Sinkfield, a seasoned prosecutor, saw through it. Williams planned the heist, borrowed the weapon, and deliberately fired, joking about the killing later during a New Orleans poker game. The confession sealed his fate, but Williams' remorseless attitude, admitting everything with chilling detachment, painted him as a monster unfit for mercy. The story split in court. Williams insisted the blast was accidental, backed by a weapons expert testifying the gun was defective and prone to misfires. Holmes corroborated, but minimized his role. Evidence told a different tale. The point-blank shot, the continued robbery amid screams, the accidental wounding of bystanders. All screamed premeditation and cruelty. Prosecutors hammered Williams' history, prior convictions for robbery and escape, a life of drugs and violence echoing his father's criminal legacy. Trial followed swiftly in the 19th Judicial District Court. On April 10, 1979, just 3 months post-crime, Williams, an African-American, faced an all-white jury in Baton Rouge. Sinkfield methodically proved first-degree murder during armed robbery, stressing Williams' intent. Defense argued lack of specific intent due to the faulty gun, but Williams never testified, a fatal omission. Guilty verdict came quick, and in the bifurcated penalty phase, the jury found aggravating factors: murder during armed robbery, creating risk to multiple lives, and committed in an especially heinous manner. No mitigating circumstances, like drug influence or troubled past, swayed them. Sentence: death. Appeals dragged across years in courts. In 1980, the Louisiana Supreme Court, 383 So.2d 369, affirmed conviction but scrutinized the sentence, remanding for review. A new penalty hearing in 1983 reaffirmed death, upheld in State v. Williams. No direct cite, but federal echoes in 649 F.2d 1019, 1981. Federal habeas in the Fifth Circuit, 737 F.2d 1372, 1984. exhaustively reviewed. Witherspoon juror exclusions, proper, as they opposed death irrevocably. Evidence sufficiency, overwhelming for aggravating factors. Prosecutors closing, not unfair. Ineffective counsel, no prejudice, despite claims of failure to suppress confession or present mitigation. Discriminatory death penalty, unsupported, no racial bias proven despite all-white jury. A key appeal centered on the electric chair's cruelty. Williams' case inspired articles like Cruel and Unusual in the Angola's Inmate magazine, detailing post-execution photos showing first to fourth-degree burns, steam from boiling fluids, and expert claims of excruciating pain, contradicting notions of instant unconsciousness. British expert Dr. Harold Hillman asserted electrocution's agony, fueling debates. Louisiana's Supreme Court Rule 28 mandated proportionality review, but Williams challenged its district-wide scope as arbitrary, violating Eighth Amendment consistency. The U.S. Supreme Court denied certiorari 464 U.S. 46, 1983, rejecting claims, with dissents from Justices Brennan and Blackmun decrying rush judgment amid proportionality uncertainties in Pulley v. Harris. Governor Edwin Edwards, facing re-election, refused clemency despite pleas from religious leaders citing redemption. A 7-2 denial cleared the final hurdle, but Williams' story gained notoriety through Sister Helen Prejean's Dead Man Walking, blending his defiance with another inmate's, inspiring the film where his character embodied remorseless evil. On December 14, 1983, at Angola State Penitentiary, 32-year-old Robert Wayne Williams met family one last time. Warden Frank Blackburn described him as somber but composed. Outside, supporters like Faith parents Vernon and Elizabeth Harvey, founders of Parents of Murdered Children, gathered, having become vocal death penalty advocates. Protesters vigiled against capital punishment's barbarity. Williams' last meal, unspecified, but he faced the chair in standard attire. Strapped in, he addressed the Harveys. "I told the truth about what happened. I would like it to be a remembrance for Louisiana and the whole country that would be a deterrence against capital punishment and show that capital punishment is no good and never has been good. I would like all the people who have fought capital punishment to keep on fighting, not just for me, but for everybody else." Jolted by 2,000 volts for 10 seconds, then 500 for 20, repeated. The sequence lasted 1 minute 10 seconds. Pronounced dead at 12:15 a.m., the first Louisiana execution in 22 years, 32nd Nationwide Post, 1977. Post-mortem photos, leaked by family and published in the Angolite, revealed horrific burns, skin charred, fluids boiled, sparking outrage and contributing to Louisiana's 1991 switch to lethal injection, halting electrocutions after botch cases like Jesse Tafaro's in Florida. Robert Wayne Williams' story endures as a chilling cautionary tale of impulsive violence, flawed justice, and execution's gruesomeness. Was he a remorseless killer or victim of a rush system? Courts said execution worthy. Survivors like the Harveys found closure, while reformers decried the barbarity. In Baton Rouge, Willie Kelly's memory lingers, a reminder that even routine nights can hide deadly shadows. When a man with a proven capacity for violence walks free and kills again, who bears responsibility? The individual who pulled the trigger, or the system that opened the door?